Please be seated. Back when our boys were young, there was this movie that we used to watch over and over and over and over again. It was called The Iron Giant. I don't know if you've ever seen it before or heard of it. It's a cartoon. It takes place in the 1950s during the Red Scare in a nice little New England town. And in this movie, if you've never seen it, it's literally about this gigantic robot that falls to Earth from space. It has super intelligence and it has superpowers, as it were, and it is giant. And this gigantic robotic monster thing befriends this little boy whose name is Hogarth Hughes. And Hogarth teaches the giant about what it means to be a person, what it means to live in this world. And one of my favorite scenes, and I would argue one of the most important scenes in this movie, is when they're sort of like looking at the sky and discussing life. And Hogarth says to this iron giant, "You are what you choose to be." Now, this is a very important part in the movie because shortly after that, the good people of, I think it's Rockwell, Maine, anyway, they decide that this iron giant is a menace, must be some super weapon sent by the Soviets to wipe us all out. And they don't like him. And the giant at one point says, "I am not a gun." And then chooses to be, in essence, Superman, and goes off and saves the world by sacrificing itself. What I love about this movie is that focus on the idea that we are what we choose to be. That whole essence of intentionality is really important, and it's super important in our faith. We are a faith of intentionality, of choice. We choose to be who we are. That's why we have things like confirmation and reaffirmation and reception. Now, it is true, we are not a faith of accidental members. But it's also true that we have things like baptism of infants. And I've had people sit there and say, well, clearly they're accidental members because they don't choose. When you're a month old, you don't choose to get baptized. Your parents choose that for you. Absolutely true. But when you're a child, your parents choose an awful lot for you. They choose basically every aspect of your life, and they do it to the best of their ability. They do what they believe is the best for you so that you can grow up to be an adult who will make choices that are good and healthy. And the church acknowledges this. We say, you're baptized, you don't have a say in that matter. That's why there are so many opportunities to then choose. Not a forced choice. I mean, when I was in 5th grade, I was 10 years old, verging on 11, and I was confirmed. Why? Because I was in 5th grade, and every 5th grader was confirmed. That's a forced choice. We don't do that. We say to people, you come and decide whether or not you want to be this. That is your choice. That is intentionality. And that is the only way that we can really be people of faith, is if we choose. You choose who you are. It is such an important aspect of who we are, because without intentionality, what is a faith? It is, at the best, unexamined and shallow. And a faith like that has virtually no impact on your life or on the world around you. But an intentional faith has roots. It has power. It has life, not only for you, but again, for all those around you. It is transformative. This choice matters. That doesn't make it easy, but it matters. It is always mattered. All you have to do is look at the Old Testament reading. Now, for a little context, this is in Deuteronomy. This is Moses' kind of swan song, as it were. He's not going to be alive a lot longer, and the people of Israel are just about to cross over into the promised land without Moses, because he doesn't get to go. But Moses gathers the people. And remember this, by this time, all the people who had left Egypt in the Exodus, they are all dead. They've been in the wilderness so long that it is an entire generational shift. And all the people Moses is talking to, they've never lived in one place. All they know is a nomadic lifestyle. So he gathers them and he says, you are going to go into something new. You're going to give up this life. You're going to take on a new life. It is not going to be easy. There will be people who will oppose you. You have to decide, is this who you will be? Will you be bound by God? And it is the one thing they will retain, the guiding principle that will bind them together as a people. But each one of them individually has to choose, is this who I will be? It's a very similar story in the gospel today. Jesus has a lot of people around him, and he is already on his way to Jerusalem and the cross. He's been there for quite a while. Several chapters before this, it says he sets his face like a flint toward Jerusalem. He knows what is waiting there. He knows that waiting for him is the cross, and he also knows that it is not going to be easy to be a follower of Jesus in these coming days. He knows that what will await his disciples will be ridicule, will be rejection, will be beatings, imprisonment, and death. So he wants to make sure that they are intentional about what they're doing. They're not just going to follow along because everybody's going that way. That would be like saying, oh, yeah, I'm an Episcopalian because I grew up an Episcopalian, but why not? That's not intentionality. He says to them, you choose. You choose to follow me. But if you do, choose God over family. Choose God over your good reputation. Choose God over even your life on earth itself. Because it will be hard. Being a person of faith requires intentionality because you will be swimming upstream against a cultural river for a very, very long time, like for the rest of your life. That's essentially what Paul was asking Philemon to do in the epistle today. I don't know if you know the story or not, but there's a guy named Philemon. He has a slave named Onesimus, and Onesimus runs away. Much like in the U.S. in the last couple of centuries, to be a slave and to run away would earn you severe punishment, perhaps even death. So the culture said Onesimus was in trouble. The culture said Philemon could take him and could punish him so severely that he could die. And nobody would blame him. And Paul said, Onesimus came to me as a runaway slave. I'm sending him back to you as a brother in Christ. Onesimus has learned, has made a choice to be a child of God. Now I'm asking you, Philemon, to swim against the current and to embrace him not as a returned slave, but as your brother. That is no easy thing to ask, because it's never been easy to swim against the tide, the stream, to follow Christ. We know this from our own experience as a nation. Next Saturday, I'm giving a presentation at the Regional Council on slavery in the Mid-Hudson Valley. And you probably know this, but if you don't already, slavery was actually a very big thing precisely here, precisely in Dutchess and Ulster counties, certainly all throughout New York. But the highest concentration of slaves was right here because we had plantations. We call them estates now, but they called them plantations then. And they had a higher concentration of slaves anywhere north of South Carolina. More than that, and by the way, I should mention, they kept that concentration of slaves basically until they were illegally forced in 1827 to not have slaves anymore. More than that, this area was incredibly hostile towards abolitionists. They hated them, thought they were busybodies, thought they were messing with their income. That's just something we have to own here. There was, however, a thin stream of Christians who fought against that, who swam against the current. I wish I could say it was Episcopalians, but Episcopalians were actually resolutely silent on slavery because they didn't want to upset people. Perhaps also because a high percentage of Episcopalians worked on Wall Street and in the banks, but I won't go there. No, that thin stream of Christians who really swam upriver the whole time was a little group called the Quakers. They were the first who said, it is immoral for us to own slaves, therefore no Quaker will own slaves. They were the first to stand up and say, we oppose this institution as an evil. And, ironically, even though this county was remarkably opposed to abolition, it also had one of the highest concentrations of Quakers in it. Therefore, this county became one of the leading corridors for the Underground Railroad because you couldn't travel more than a couple of hours without hitting a Quaker home, and every single Quaker home was considered a possible layover for the Underground Railroad. They did this at remarkable personal cost because they had to send these runaway slaves away with money, and quite often it was their own. And they did it at remarkable personal risk because it was illegal. There was a point where they had to choose. Do I go along with the current of the stream of culture, or do I follow Christ? These choices are not easy. And this intentionality is just as important today as it was then, as it was in the days of Jesus, as it was in the days of Moses. Because we live in a world where service and care for the poor and the weak and the outcast, for the stranger, is not something that is valued. At most, it's sometimes given lip service, maybe good thoughts, but in general, it's not got a lot more than lip service. We live in a culture that does not value reflection, self-examination, meditation. We think of those as time wasters, not profitable. It requires a choice to follow Jesus. That's why I love so much the liturgy of the reaffirmation of faith. It's sort of like confirmation, but it's not. Because you can go and reaffirm your faith when the bishop comes as many times as you want. Every time the bishop comes, you can kneel before him and you can say, I'm in. I'm still in. I'm not going anywhere. This is my choice. In fact, when Bishop Shin comes in December, I invite you all to do that. Would that blow him away if suddenly everybody stood up and said, I reaffirm my faith? Come and see me if you want to do it. It'd be pretty awesome. But you know what? You don't have to have a major ceremony to reaffirm your faith. Every single day, when you rest in God's love, when you go out into the world and share God's love, every day that you stand up to an injustice, whether it be tiny or major, every morning when you get up and pray, every night when you pray, every Sunday when you come here and kneel at the altar rail and receive Holy Communion, or when you stand up and embrace the person next to you and say, the peace of God be always with you. Every one of those times, you are making a choice to follow Christ. The reason I like that movie is because we learn that you are what you choose to be. And I choose to be a child of God. Amen.